When I was born, God looked down, pointed at me and said, "He's the man."
They called him arrogant, a rebel, undisciplined. They said his personality was too big for the Brazilian national team, that his explosive behavior could cost an entire nation its World Cup dream. But when Brazil stood on the brink of missing the World Cup for the first time in history, only one man had what it took to change their fate. A wild spirit no one could tame, yet on the pitch he turned the impossible into reality. This is the story of a temperamental genius, a player who broke rules, defied authority, and pushed every limit. But when his country desperately needed a hero, he was the only one who could turn chaos into glory. Born in 1966, in the heart of one of Rio de Janeiro's most infamous favelas, Romário de Souza Faria didn't have an easy start in life. His father worked as a bricklayer. His mother, a homemaker, was the foundation of the family. And even through poverty and hardship, she never stopped encouraging her son to chase his dream. There wasn't much money, but there was talent, real, undeniable talent. From a young age, Romário stood out. He wasn't just skilled, he was fearless. He didn't just play, he dared. And with that talent came fire, a sharp attitude, a stubborn, untamed genius. His first steps in football came with Estrelinha, a small amateur team his father created in Vila da Penha. From day one, Romário stood out. He was clearly different. By 1979, he joined the youth squad at Olaria, and there, his nose for goal stood out just as much as his temper. He didn't like being benched. He didn't take criticism well. Even as a kid, you could tell he wasn't built for the bench. He was born for the big stage. Romário's talent didn't go unnoticed. Vasco da Gama brought him into their youth system. And that's when the legend really started to take shape. Even among the most talented players, Romário stood apart. He was lightning fast, his dribbling was tight and precise, and in front of the goal, he was ice cold. But what really made him different was his attitude. He had that swagger, he was confident, some would even say arrogant. He didn't bow to anyone, he didn't care about pleasing coaches. Romário played every match like he knew he was the best on the field, and maybe he was. In 1985, at just 19 years old, he was promoted to Vasco's senior team. It didn't take long before the goals started pouring in. From 1985 to 1988, Romário scored 70 goals for the club. Defenders gave him a nickname, the Hellish Little Man. Then came 1988. He was called up for the Olympic Games in Seoul, and that's when the world truly took notice. 7 goals in 6 matches, a silver medal, and a star was born. That performance opened the gates to Europe. The boy from Jacarezinho, who once dribbled through the dusty streets of Vila da Penha, was now ready to cross the ocean and prove that his talent knew no limits. In 1988, after shining at the Olympic Games, Romário took his first big step abroad. He signed with PSV Eindhoven in the Netherlands, his first European club. But even far from home, he didn't change. Romário wasn't trying to fit in. He was just being himself. From the very beginning, he lit up the Dutch league. Between 1988 and 1993, he scored over 100 goals for PSV, won 3 league titles, and led the scoring charts 3 seasons in a row. But along with the goals came the drama. He skipped training sessions, clashed with reporters, was always making headlines for the wrong reasons. Still, no matter what he did off the pitch, he always delivered on it. While he impressed Europe, he also started making history with Brazil. In 1989, playing at home, Romário was the driving force behind Brazil's Copa America win. It had been 40 years since the national team lifted that trophy. And in the final, at the Maracanã, Romário scored the winning goal against Uruguay. He was the difference maker, and next to him was Bebeto. A new partnership was born, and it would soon become legendary. Romário was on fire, and with the 1990 World Cup approaching, all eyes were on him. Everyone expected him to lead Brazil's attack, but fate had other plans. In March of that year, just 3 months before the tournament, he suffered a serious ankle injury playing for PSV. He had to undergo surgery, and even though he recovered quickly, he wasn't fully fit by the time the World Cup began. Still, coach Sebastião Lazzaroni brought him to Italy. But Romário spent most of the tournament on the bench. He played just once, against Scotland. No goals, no magic, nothing. Brazil was knocked out in the round of 16, defeated by Argentina, by Maradona, by Canigia. It was a painful exit, a lost tournament, and for Romário, pure frustration. He knew he could have made a difference, but he never got the chance. And if there's one thing Romário never did, it was stay quiet. Back in Europe, he kept doing what he did best, scoring goals, lots of them. But the off-field issues never really went away. He'd show up late, vanish during holidays. He lived by his own rules and never asked for permission. That attitude eventually started to cause friction with the Brazilian national team. Even though he was the most lethal striker in the world, he was being left out of the squad. Coach Carlos Alberto Pereira didn't hide the reason.
Look, nobody questions Romário's talent. But right now, I need a group that's committed, disciplined, and represents the image this national team stands for. And unfortunately, his behavior just didn't align with that.
And then, everything reached a boiling point. Brazil was getting ready for a friendly against Germany. Romário had been called up, but during training, something unexpected happened. Coach Carlos Alberto Pereira put him with the reserves. No explanation, no heads up, just benched. Romário didn't argue. He accepted it, but not in silence. The next day, he faced the press, and he didn't hold back.
Of course, I didn't like being on the bench. I traveled 16 hours to play, not to sit and watch, but in the end, it's the coaching staff who makes the decisions.
It was raw, honest. That was just Romário being Romário, but the coaching staff didn't like it, not one bit. They acted fast and cut him from the squad. Just like that, Brazil moved on without its top scorer. Weeks passed, then months, and for over a year, the national team played without him. To many, it felt like that was it. His time with the national team over. And the dream of playing in the World Cup slipping further and further away. But football always leaves room for a twist, and fate wasn't quite done with Romário. In 1993, a new door opened. Barcelona came calling. Led by the legendary Johan Cruyff, they wanted something different. Cruyff wasn't just looking for a striker, he wanted magic. He wanted someone unpredictable, someone lethal. And he knew if he could channel Romário's fire, he'd have the deadliest striker on the planet. Romário arrived full of confidence and backed it up immediately. 30 goals in his first La Liga season, plays that looked more like art than football. Big wins, big moments, and then El Clásico, Barcelona versus Real Madrid. Final score, 5-0. Romário scored 3 of them and sent the Camp Nou into a frenzy. The fans were in love, Spain was in awe, the world took notice. He had become the king of Catalonia. But even at the very top of the football world, one thing still haunted him. The yellow jersey, the national team, the World Cup dream. While he conquered Europe, Romário was still out of the Brazilian squad. While Romário dazzled in Europe, the Brazilian national team was struggling. After the round of 16 exit in the 1990 World Cup, Carlos Alberto Parreira took charge. A methodical coach, disciplined, risk-averse, his plan was simple: build a well-balanced team, tactically disciplined, functional, efficient. But there was one thing missing, actually a few things: flair, courage, and Romário. Parreira chose system over spark, teamwork over instinct. Players who followed orders without question. But without Romário, Brazil's attack lost its edge. There was no one to break the game open, no one who could decide a match in a single touch. The results? Worrying. Fans were frustrated. The press was ruthless. For Brazil, qualifying was supposed to be a formality, but it turned into a nightmare. A shocking loss to Bolivia, a draw against Ecuador, narrow wins at home. And for the first time in history, Brazil was in real danger of missing a World Cup. The pressure was immense. Parreira was under fire. Still, the coaching staff refused to call Romário. Parreira kept saying, "I can't bring in a player who'll destabilize the group." But the truth? The group was already falling apart. The team was tense, flat, lifeless, no confidence, no identity. The final game of the qualifiers: win or stay home. That was the scenario. The pressure was immense. And in the end, they did what they said they never would. They brought him back. No longer seen as a problem, he had become a nation's last hope. That night, the Maracanã was electric. Over 90,000 fans packed the stadium. The tension felt like war. On the other side, Uruguay, a heavyweight. And fear was real, but one name echoed through the stands. He stood there, calm, focused, like a predator waiting for his moment. From the first whistle, Brazil was nervous, tense, anxious. But at 22 minutes into the first half, a pass from Bebeto found him. Romário struck it first time, sharp, clean, unstoppable. The Maracanã erupted. He was back, and he wasn't done. At 39 minutes of the second half, Bebeto delivered again, and Romário found the net once more. Game over. Brazil was going to the World Cup. Mission complete. Romário had returned with a statement. After that night at the Maracanã, there were no more doubts. Romário had to go to the World Cup. This time, no one dared to question it. And the mission was just beginning. The world was watching. Brazil was dreaming. In the opening match against Russia, it took Romário just 26 minutes to show why he was there. Against Cameroon, once again, right place, right time. And as the World Cup unfolded, with all its chaos, pressure, and impossible challenges, Romário was there, calm when the world trembled, deadly when it mattered most. Thanks to his brilliance, Brazil clawed its way back to the biggest stage of all. But destiny had one final twist. This wouldn't be decided by flair, by magic, or by a moment of genius. The greatest battle of them all would be settled from the penalty spot. A test not just of skill, but of nerve, of heart, of soul. And now a nation held its breath. At that point, there was no debate. Romário was the best player in the tournament. The kid from Jacarezinho, the problem, the rebel, was one step away from immortality. Four-time champions, 24 years later. And right there, in the middle of the field, was Romário. They called him arrogant, called him a problem, undisciplined. But in the end, he was the hero Brazil needed. An icon, a legend. He didn't follow rules, didn't ask for approval, didn't play politics. He just delivered. He turned chaos into glory.